Hello, welcome to Talk Wildlife, and today I have with me again, because he's been with me before, to talk about Vietnam dragonflies, Tom Kompier. Hiya Tom, how are you?
Hi Alan, I'm very fine, thank you.
Good, good. And today we're going to be talking about the opposite side of the globe. We're going to be talking about Brazil, and we're going to in particular be talking about REGUA. So we've done hawk moths, of which it has plenty, with Allan, and we've done butterflies with Allan, and it was only fair that we actually now did dragonflies. So what we'll do, Tom, is I think I'll go straight into sharing screen, because I want to talk a little bit, first of all, about the book that you've put together. And I do have the cover of that. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about REGUA and why it's so special for dragonflies.
Okay.
I want to just draw people's attention to the headline there, which was in one of the issues of Dragonfly News, which is actually the magazine for the British Dragonfly Society. It's quite a bold statement. The world's best hotspots for dragonflies. Now, obviously, it's got a question mark after it. But having said that, this was when there was only recorded 204 species there. But you're now going to tell me that there's more than 204 species.
Well, there's 207 found now. But there's been some arguments, because let's say it's one of the best places in the world, for sure.
One of the best places in the world. Right.
Some of the places have been researched longer, or they're maybe you can, for instance, see as many species just walking from a lodge. Whereas here, to get to the places high up in the mountains, you have to sort of drive around. There's all sorts of little things that you can look at. But having said that, to have an area of 10 by 20 kilometers with, 150% of the species that we would have in Europe, that's just exceptional. So whether it's the best place, it's certainly one of the very best places for dragonfly watching in the world.
Yeah, well, putting into context there when you said about the size, because clearly this is not a big area we're talking about, and yet it has such a density of dragonflies. So before we move on to the book, just very quickly, what makes REGUA special for them then? What are the particular habitats or the mix of habitats that make REGUA so special?
Well, the Atlantic rainforest is just like Southeast Asia. It's one of the biodiversity hotspots in the world. So there is already that anyway, the biodiversity in this part of the world is fabulous. And then REGUA just sits at the foothills of the Serra do Argaus, which is the mountain range that sort of runs to the north of Rio de Janeiro, where that Atlantic rainforest is. So within the reserve, which is, it's large, but as you said, it's still a limited area. So the altitude ranges from about 50 meters above sea level to nearly 2,000. So just that. By itself, the slope of the mountains, they help cover this immense range of different habitats that attract different species. And then, of course, the reserve has world-class wetlands as well. So the commoner species are all of South America are all represented, and then you have all these specialties that sit there in the Atlantic rainforest.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly it's a sort of special place for REGUA and well looked after, which I always like to get in, because I know they do a fantastic job of looking after it.
And it's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
So before before we actually go into the species, just want to mention your book, because like Allan, who's produced the hawk moths and the butterflies, you have a book out about dragonflies it's a slightly larger area than just REGUA, but talk us through the book. When first of all did it come out?
In 2015 we finished it, and the project started in 2011 approximately, so it took about 4 years to first of all the research and then put it together.
Okay, and does that cover a greater number of species than are found at REGUA, or are the species that you find at REGUA, which you've now said 207, is that sort of the total number of species that would be found in southeastern Brazil?
No. Southeastern Brazil has more species than that. I would say that it's meant for the reserve. But yeah, in the general area of that part, so let's say the northern half of Rio de Janeiro state, you should be able to identify 99.99% of any specimens that you come across with this book. It's good to mention that there is a sort of an underlayer of species that occur all over South America. So half of the species in the book will help you identify dragonflies wherever you go in South America, or at least get an idea of what genus you're looking at. Yeah. And then you have the specialties that occur in the Atlantic rainforest, or even in just parts of the Atlantic rainforest. But all these species are recorded either in the reserve or very near to the reserve.
Right. Brilliant. And what we'll do is we'll talk about a few species now, because I mean, it's the same with anywhere. You need to have a guide book of some description in order to be able to identify these things. I suppose the difficulty you've got in sort of Brazil and in the areas that you've been in, and in Vietnam as well, is that not every dragonfly or damselfly actually has been sort of given a name, identified, and some of them may need splitting because they've been put in a group together where there's actual subtle differences. So that, I think, will become apparent as we talk through the next few slides. Right.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting group of flatwings. You know that damselflies tend to, as we know in Europe, they differ from dragonflies, because dragonflies keep their wings spread sideways and damselflies have them folded over their back. Yeah. But not all of them do, actually. In Europe, lesties, also flatwings, they have their wings spread out. And here in the rainforest, you have a group of very colorful, very beautiful, large, really large, because this thing is easily 5 centimeters, damselflies that also have their wings spread out. There are about 10 species in the area. They're more numerous as a genus over South America, but there's about 10 of them in REGUA. And some of them have been described a long time ago. Now, the problem here is, for instance, this one. That's if you ask why the word ovatum is between these quotation marks, is because the original specimen was kept in Leningrad when it was still called Leningrad. Now it's, of course, again St. Petersburg. And during the Second World War, burned during bombardments. So we don't have the original specimen. We have a very sort of limited description of what it looked like, which says it's black with yellow dots on its back, and a yellow abdomen tip. And there are several species like that in South America. So we don't know for sure which of those species is the one that originally was described as ovatum. So I think it's this one, but I cannot be sure for 100%, and that's why ovatum is between these quotation marks. But we have to start somewhere.
Yes,
giving these things a name, so that if we would decide that this would be a neotype of the original species, then the others could be described. The one problem that I ran into in South America is that it's not possible for foreigners to work with Brazilian material. So I really have to rely on the progress that the Brazilian scholars achieve with these species, and they're limited in their resources, and sometimes these things therefore take longer. And of course, we also know that sadly the big museum in Rio de Janeiro burned down a few years ago. So they have had a huge setback in the ability to describe these species. Anyway, so that's about this particular flatwing, which is a brilliant species.
And it reminds me shape-wise of our willow emerald. And our willow emerald oviposits its eggs into sort of the bark of willows. Does this do a similar thing, or is this, you know, how does this oviposit?
No, this probably puts possibly implant material, but dead material, long streams. We have actually seen very few of these things oviposit. We'll have a photo later of a tandem of cinnamon flatwing, which we did see oviposit in small streams inside the rainforest, where they probably actually deposit the eggs in leaf litter. Right. So this is another example. It's a similar flatwing of the same genus. The original description, based as it was on dead material, has these huge spots on the thorax, described as reddish orange. So there's been at first there was a bit of a debate whether this is really that species, because the color is different. But we have to realize that these are live specimens, and sometimes their color is different from what you would see after 100 years in the museum.
Yeah, and you know, again, you know, some dragonflies actually do lose their color even through their age, you know, so I suppose you've got to contend with that to an extent as well. Yeah, sure, but these things, they don't develop pruinosity, so they stay pretty vivid. Actually, the more mature they are, the more vivid they are. Right. That's stunning. This is another one, which is within the group is very peculiar, because it actually is not inside the forest, but it's on larger streams, on rivers, where it sits on rocks. So it's and you can see it sits horizontal, whereas all the others will be hanging. Yeah. So this is a very interesting species, but it belongs to the same genus. And this one too, we had very big problems at first to identify it by name, because in this case the specimen that is kept is almost black. And in real life, as you can see, it's not black. Right. So is that an anomaly? Is it, you know, different aged damselfly? Maybe it has to do with the fact how it was preserved. You know, sometimes depending on the treatment that they receive, they just lose the color or change color. There are all sorts of effects. Right. Okay. Speaking of colours, cinnamon flatwing, this is stunning colours. So hopefully this won't ever lose its colours if it's preserved. So well, this is the one that you said about the ovipositor. It's not preserved because that's why we gave the English name here. This has not been described yet. It's not rare. It's quite common in the REGUA area, but it has not got a scientific name yet. So it has to go by its English name, the name that we devised for it, while waiting for it to be described eventually. Right. Okay. So yeah, that sounds as good a name as any for that one. Right. And then we've moved on to this one, which, you know, again, it's what strikes me there is it looks like it's got an incredibly long abdomen. Well, it does not really look that way. It actually has. Yeah, and that's, you know, there's a couple of species that are longer bodied than we're used to, and God knows why, but they're very attractive. And this is certainly a thing that within the genus Meniverium, there are 3 species in REGUA. This is the one with the longest abdomen. It's also the commonest, even though it's very difficult to find, and it's just a very beautiful thing to see. So people that go to the area are always thrilled to see these kind of things. There's a few other examples of very long-bodied damselflies that we'll move to next. Anyway, this is just a very beautiful thing. Yeah.
This is his brother, so to speak. So it's from the same genus. It's shorter bodied. It's more like what we would be used to. This, in fact, is a critically endangered species that had disappeared from the one known site near Rio, and we were very happy to be able to relocate it close to the reserve. Actually, so it's just outside the reserve. But it's in habitat that is also present within the reserve, and I'm really desperate to find it again, because this particular place may well in the future be inundated due to a reservoir building plan in view of the need for a good water supply for Rio de Janeiro city. Anyway, so for people that go and visit the area, this really is one of the things that you can't see anywhere else. And on top of that, it's an incredibly beautiful, beautiful species.
So would there be steps in place if this reservoir goes ahead? Is there steps in place to do something about preserving this species?
No. One, we have not found its larvae. And you would need larvae if you wanted to rear them somewhere or introduce them somewhere. But actually, it's with animals like this, it's not so much the insects themselves, but the habitat that is crucial.
Yeah.
So if we don't know exactly what its habitat's requirements are, just rearing larvae and putting them somewhere in a different swamp won't solve the problem. Right? Yeah. So it's better to try to keep the place where they are intact as much as possible, and just hope that, because it's actually just outside just within or on the border of the area that might be inundated in the future. Let's just hope that they'll be safe. But trying to preserve the habitat that there are now is probably the first thing that should be tried. However, it's not land that belongs to the reserve, so we're a little bit of a tight spot there.
Yeah.
This thing is tiny. It's so tiny that and it flies over very, very shallow trickles of seeps of water in the shade, and it doesn't like the sunshine. That it's, if it were not for that little pruinosity on the abdomen tip, you would not see it, even if it flies. It wow. Moves very slowly, and as you can see, it's very dark. It flies over dark ground. Very difficult thing to see. But we did find it, luckily.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And this turned out to be a new species to science that luckily, together with the Brazilian scholars' help, we were able to publish. And as you can see, is named after the reserve. So this really does credit to the incredible work that they're doing at REGUA, that they have now a species of damselfly that's named after the reserve itself.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So you said it was small. So how small? What? How long is it?
Maybe 3 centimeters. But the thing is,
really?
It's so thin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's yeah.
That's incredible. 3 centimeters. Right, and here it is again. I'm assuming, yeah, this is the same species. So.
Yep. So this is in copula. Somewhere in the dark. I used flash for this photo. That's why it's slightly what's the word, over
slightly overexposed.
Yeah, actually. Yeah. So it's
it looks fine to me.
But I'm happy that I was able to get them with this, and the female will we've seen this one oviposit, and it just oviposits in the mud.
Right, yeah. And what strikes me there is obviously, you know, you're saying that this is only about 3 centimeters, but it still looks to have a significantly large abdomen for its size. So if I saw just that picture, I would never guess that that was a really tiny damselfly. I'd think that was quite a large damselfly.
Yeah, what can I say? Yeah, absolutely. These things are tiny,
Yeah.
and they're still long-bodied as far as their shape goes. All these Forstiptionuras are very thin, slender things. And this is just one of the smaller species.
Amazing, really amazing. Again, speaking of slender.
Yeah, this is a very interesting group. This is much larger. I'm not sure how long, maybe seven centimeters. It's the longest bodied of the Leptagrions in the area. Interestingly, although this seems to be a very striking species and it's quite large, I never saw it for years. So only in the one but last year of the research, after I'd been told that it should have been the commonest in the group, and I still hadn't found it, I stumbled across it. And it turns out that once you know what kind of habitat they prefer, they're quite easy to find. But they're away from streams, even inside the forest. What you have to look for is groups of Bromeliads, either on rocks or on the trees, and that is where the females oviposit inside the Bromeliad, so inside leftover water. And the males sit on the leaves, guarding these Bromeliads, waiting for the females to arrive, which is why we coined the name, the vernacular name, Bromeliad guards for them. So this is the long-tailed Bromeliad guard, which again has an incredibly long abdomen.
And just for those that may not be familiar with bromeliads, can you just give a very quick description of what they are? Because some people might be sitting there thinking, what's a bromeliad?
It's one of those tropical plants that sits on a tree and is a bit like funnel shaped, I guess. Is that the right word? So it's like a beaker, which so that when it rains, the water accumulates. And there's quite a few species, not just insects, but also frogs and so on, that use those plants to make their home in. And these, so they're either on trees or they are on rocks, and they, So it's your typical tropical plant that you may also have at home, but anyway, very common in the forest there.
Yeah. And here they are mating. Mating,
yes.
Yeah.
And then,
Wow.
Yep. And this is the largest damselfly that you have there. It's a Canagrionid like the others, so it's they used to be placed in a completely different family, but they're just part of the sort of the normal damselfly group. But they're called helicopters, and that is because not just because of their size, but because they have the incredible ability to move backwards and upwards and navigate through the forest at a very slow speed, beating those pretty large wings. This thing is close to 9 centimeters, I think. So it's a huge damselfly, and when they move around, it's I wouldn't say spooky. Spooky would be the wrong term, I guess. But it's there is something, mythical about them. The way that they can so slowly move through the forest, and you can actually see each wing beat. And if they stand close to you in midair, they will move away, just flying backwards and up and so on. It's just fantastic things. There's quite a few species in South America. This is the only one in the Atlantic rainforest.
Right. This is stunning thing. This is really, really nice.
The leaf sitters. Yeah, I stuck these in because actually maybe you can show the next one as well.
Yeah.
Straight away. This one is slightly more prune-nosed than the other one because of age, but in fact, these things look identical. Now, there's a part of the wing called the triangle, and in the one species it's got 3 cells, and the other one's got 2 cells, and that's the thing that you won't normally see if you just see it sitting on a leaf. But the thing is that one of these species sits at flowing water, so rivers, and the other one sits at ponds. And this is the kind of clue that if you're looking to find species in an area that has not been described, you have to very much look at their habits. Quite often, the larvae of these species are sort of specialists that either live in still waters or in flowing waters, in currents. So if you see a species that is present at both, it might be an anomaly that is just very tolerant to any kind of habitat, or it's not one species, but it's 2 species. And in this case, that's the fact.
So it's probably an obvious thing to say, but there's a lot of almost detective work has to go into what you're doing there. You're not just taking it for granted. Oh yeah, that's just that particular species that is also in this particular habitat. You know, when you're talking about the difference, such a minutiae of a difference, you know, you really have to have your wits about you to go, right, no, I'm going to check this one because it's in a different habitat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. We didn't include photos of another group, the Mycotheria, of which there are about 10 species, I think, at the reserve, directly at the wetlands. When I first went there, I thought that there was not just one very common species, but that it included several species. And I think I left that first time I visited the place with the impression that there might be 3 or 4 species involved. I didn't know exactly what they were, but probably 3 or 4 species. But now I know that there's at least 10 species. And it takes a while before you start seeing those tiny clues that give away that these things are indeed different. It's like you said, it's detective work, and it's because you start with scientific papers that include at best black and white line drawings of these insects. So translating that into what they look like in real life is a challenge, but it's also incredible fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You already put this on the screen.
Yeah, you've got an example here. When you sent this through, I thought they were the same species.
Yeah, well, so did I. And but interestingly, if you look at it has its first set of legs folded upwards, as you can see, just behind the eyes, and on the thigh there, you can see that the front part is black.
Yeah.
Go to the other one. You can see that it's all straw coloured. Right. Now these are the kind of clues that you have to look for. In fact, once you notice, then you'll probably also see that on the top of the head, the marking is slightly different, and the appendages are slightly different. So that once you figured out that these things are not the same, you start thinking, how could I ever have overlooked that there are all these little clues that tell me that they're different? But at first, so I didn't. Actually, if we go now on trips, I tend to see both of them always. You have to catch them at night because they fly at dusk. These are large insects, but they hunt for very small prey, for mosquitoes and so on. And they only do that in the last 15 minutes of daylight, or inside the forest, and then you won't see them. But at first, again, this is a thing that I had overlooked for several years before I realized that there was a second species involved.
Yeah, yeah. And then we have here what looks like a clubtail.
It is a clubtail, indeed. We coined it the Rio mini clubtail. Coming from Europe, it's astonishing to see a gomphid that is only a few centimeters long. In Asia, I've become used to these things also being very small sometimes. But in Europe, we don't have that kind of thing. And this is also, you can't tell here, but the appendages are really weird. It's got something, a contraption that looks a bit like the hook that you have behind your car to pull a caravan. Or maybe that's a very Dutch thing to say, because you know, we all have caravans. But anyway, yeah, it's a really very weird contraption. So when this was described, that's why it's called Archaeogomphis. They thought that was something prehistoric, sort of, but in fact it's very specialized. So it's not at all a leftover relic of days gone by. It's just a very specialized tiny little clubtail. Very difficult to find, by the way, but it's in the area.
Yeah, and again, you said small, so roughly how big is this?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just yeah, maybe 3-4 centimeters.
3-4 cent, right?
Yeah,
right. That is small.
This is a larger gomphid, and we included this one because when I first caught it, I couldn't find it in the key for the male gomphids of South America, for the genera. So I thought I might have found a new genus, which is, you know, you're always happy to find a new species to science, but finding a new genus which has not been seen by anyone before, that's even more thrilling. But no, it was pointed out to me by Angelo Pinto, I think, who sometimes helped with IDing stuff or giving advice. He told me that there were a few species in South America of which only the females have been described. And if you look at the wing structure, that is exactly what it is. It has a few features in the venation that help identify it as the genus Previogomphis, of which the males had just never been seen. So yeah. It was very, very nice to find it, but it was not new to science. And in fact, it's just very difficult to find because it's inside the forest at say between 500 and 800 meters altitude, in that range. So it's always on steep forested parts, and just very, very difficult to find species there.
Yeah, yeah, and just in case there's somebody out there that hasn't picked up on what you're saying there, this particular one is a male of the species.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Yes. So this is the male. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of the last things I think. We should include a few of the libellulids, which make out such a large portion of, of the dragonflies around. I picked on this one because it's this is an enigmatic species that was known from Argentina. Nothing more was known really about its habitat or whereabouts. But apparently it also occurs in Brazil, so in a much wider area than previously thought. We called it in English a mantled skimmer. It's tiny again, sorry to say, and slender. Yeah. Actually, there's only one place near REGUA where it's been found in a few old fish ponds on the border of the reserve.
Right, and so there's one place where it's been found. Is it still likely to be around, or, you know, if somebody was thinking of going on the tour there, is this something that they might see? Yeah,
if you go to those fish ponds. And you're persistent, because there are a few, and they're not easy to find, then you will see it. I've consistently seen it for every year that I've been going in the last 4 or 5 years.
Right, and I know when we looked earlier on at the numbers, they'd gone up by a few, and this potentially could be one of them that pushed those numbers up, because is this not the one that's been most recently discovered there?
Yeah, this exactly. This is during the last trip that we did this last winter. We found this addition, which is good news, because it's a specialist of the Atlantic rainforest, but somehow we had not found it. So it was one of those things on my list of things that I didn't understand, things that should be there, but we had not been able to locate. And lo and behold, there it was. So it's in the area.
Right. So that was excellent. So just before I let you go, what is sort of the sort of conservation status of dragonflies over there? I mean, as a whole, you know, are they doing okay? I mean, clearly at REGUA, they're managing the habitats correctly. So, you know, is that something that for the rest of sort of Brazil, you know, is that common that people are managing the habitats for them? How are dragonflies as a group doing over there?
Yeah, it's difficult to say, Alan. Brazil is huge, but let's say it's a difficult area because of the climate to have agriculture, and therefore, if you want to grow crops, people tend to use pesticides. So the problems with chemicals, just as in Europe, is equally important, I guess, in Brazil, and particularly in REGUA is fabulous because it protects the forest and the water in it right from the top of the mountains all the way down to the foothills. So that's protects the water quality essentially for as much as you can. There's no deposition of chemicals within the area apart from stuff that might be blown in through the air. But if you go just over the top of the mountains at the top of the range, then there is a lot of chemical use for agricultural purposes. That's on the other side of the watershed, so that water flows away from the reserve. But the species that are right at the top, they might well suffer from that. And the same in the lowlands. And so right at the very edge, at the lower edge of the reserve, you have also problems with agriculture. So as soon as you get outside of the reserve, it's difficult, and you immediately notice that the commoner species, as elsewhere, are sort of doing okay-ish, but the rarer species, very obviously immediately disappear. Yeah. So whether that is for the whole of Brazil or the whole of South America, I guess it's a problem we have all over the world at the moment.
Right. Okay. What I've noticed is we've got a slight satellite delay now between your picture and your voice, but fortunately we've got through the interview, so that's a good thing. So your book is, I believe, available on the REGUA site. Is that the best place for me to put a link to it? Is it available elsewhere?
You can get it through the Dragonfly Society in England.
Right.
People can always contact me. The proceeds go to REGUA itself, but it's difficult to if you order it in Brazil, then it has to be shipped from Brazil, whereas so you can actually order it here in in Europe. So either in the UK or through me. And if you go to REGUA, and by all means, I would certainly advise people to go there. You should ask in advance if they have copies available there.
Yeah.
And if they do, of course, you can also buy it at the reserve. However, like I said, because it covers also some of the commoner species that you will find all over South America, and there are no other field guides available really for South America, it will come in handy wherever you go.
Yeah. Oh, that's worth knowing. If I ever get to South America, if I'm ever allowed out of my house again, who knows, one day. Tom, that was excellent. So thanks ever so much for your time. And again, because obviously there's the one that we did about Vietnam. Hopefully you'll have gone somewhere else so I can do another interview with you about somewhere else exotic in the world.
Currently I'm not going very far.
Yeah, too right. Yeah.
Like myself, but yeah.
I can see it now. Dragonflies of Tom Kompier's garden. Yeah, why not? Tom, thanks ever so much. I will hopefully sort of our paths will cross again in the future. But for now, thank you ever so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Allan.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye now.